Good morning, everyone. This is Melanie Denise from the BC Oil and Gas Commission. I have Tim Malcolm in our Fort St. John office. He's the organizer and technician today. He's recording this session, just so that you know. If you could please mute your mics and use the chat screen to post questions, we'll answer those at the end if we can. I'm looking down the attendee list and I see a lot of familiar names, so thank you for joining us today. And thank you for all of those people that contributed to helping me put together the training today. Petrinex has obviously been a lot of work bringing it into BC, and I want to make sure that I try and cover all of the, bases as far as the commission goes. I just wanted to bring up some housekeeping while I had you. There are going to be some big changes here at the Commission over the next month, not only with Petrinex, but we are moving offices this weekend. And we'll also be having some systems outages. The one to note for Petrinex is October 26th to November 1st. And that's all covered in the most recent INDBs that were sent out and available on our website. Okay, today's training is going to be very brief, I think. It's fairly straightforward for all of you that are already familiar with eSubmission. It is a very straightforward process. Like I said, I think you'll see some very familiar screens and processes as we go through the slideshow. There's about 19 slides. I honestly have not timed how long it takes to give this, but I'm thinking 10-15 minutes, and then we'll get to the questions at the end, like I said. The scope is limited in this training to just the task of creating a new completion event. I've tried to cover off some anticipated questions that you might have regarding the relationship to Petrinex, but Petrinex questions need to be directed to Petrinex. And I have some resources at the end as well for contacting them with your questions. Okay, so off we go. This is just the blurb about the Commission, what we do in the province of British Columbia, our mission and vision values. This guide, I can see that I've already made a mistake here in the introduction, but this is a document. It's a guide to help you through the process. We encourage you to always phone us or visit our website if you have further questions to make sure that you fall within our regulations for operating in the province. Today we'll be having an overview of what Petrinex will look like in BC, the retirement of the BC 11 and the data that it collected and what's happening to it now. The reporting flow charts, how the tasks have been divided up for collecting data, and I'll walk you through the process of creating a new completion event in the Commission eSubmission portal. And again, like I said, at the end, we'll have a resources page for you. So the Commission remains British Columbia's repository for all well data. Petrinex is populated with limited well data to support the reporting and disposition of volumetrics. Petrinex requires reporting from all active wells and facilities. Some of the most important information, the general information, is that on Monday, October 26th, the BC 11 will be retired. This is your last day to report status changes via BC 11, and that's for production months, September and earlier. On Monday, November 5th, Petrinex goes live, and the Commission eSubmission portal goes live as well for creating new completion events. Just to note that the Alberta and Saskatchewan Business Associate or user expectations compared to the BC user experience, there are some notable differences between the provincial systems. Well event management is slightly different, and the status change management process is different. Again, there are more detailed documents available to cover this. Just that I'm acknowledging that I realize that there is a little bit of a difference, or there is a difference, and I'm going to try and note those as I go through the presentation. So the BC 11 retirement, in the pre-Petrinex environment, production, injection, and disposal operations, the permit holders were required to submit a notice of commencement or suspension of operations, the BC 11, to the Ministry of Finance. And that data was then forwarded to the Commission, where we managed it internally for the database. When we received information and the completion event didn't already exist, we manually created one and assigned it to the appropriate drilling event in our own OGC system. And this sometimes was prompted by the receipt of a completion workover report. So we were always making sure that the appropriate CE was in the system. And it was the creation and availability of this CE that allowed for the reporting of oil, condensate, natural gas, and water for the well events. And they were linked to the appropriate reporting facility. So where things are changing is that operators will no longer be using the BC11 to report this data as of Monday, October 22nd. Once Petrinex goes online, the BC11 process is retired and new completion events will be created directly in the Commission eSubmission portal by you with system updates being pushed out through our hub. I have touched on this later on. When you go into our eSubmission system and create the new CE, there is a relay time to push that out to Petrinex. So you're usually looking at no more than 10 minutes for it to become available in the Petrinex environment. Well permit holders will use eSubmission to create all completion events, even those that occurred prior to October 2018. So the eSubmission portal is the place to go now to start your reporting and create that CE. Excuse me. And where a completion event does not already exist upon receipt of a completion workover report, we again will create one with the systems being updated accordingly. So if we receive a completion workover report and see that the CE has not been created yet, we will create it internally, and then that information will be pushed out to the Petrinex environment through the same hub. So it will be available almost immediately. Well permit holders will then proceed to Petrinex where they may manage the status changes and volumetric reporting. So status changes are not going to be managed in eSubmission. You have to switch over to Petrinex for that. And obviously Petrinex is also where the volumetric reporting is going to be managed. The new processes will involve the CE creation through the Commission eSubmission portal, and status changes and volumetrics are entered into Petrinex directly. So that's basically the summary of the new process. Again, just to summarize what the BC11 retirement means, you might be familiar with this oil and gas royalties and freehold production tax screen. That is what's being retired. I've created a couple of charts and graphs to help you visualize the changes that are being made in BC. Oh, I can see that I forgot to put my diagram in here. Basically, what we were going to put there is the OGC submission or commission portal. So you will start the process by creating your new CE in the eSubmission portal. It's transported to our hub, and that hub relays the information to the Petrinex environment. You as industry are going to come and make your status changes and your volumetric reporting through Petrinex, and the Ministry of Finance is also linked into the Petrinex world. Data entry, there's a Commission eSubmission chart, and there's the Petrinex lines as well. You'll see how the tasks are divided. The Commission eSubmission, you'll be reporting the completion event, the date, having the UE assigned, field code, pool code, the pool, the GCI top depth, and the GCI base depth are what are collected in the eSubmission portal. And for Petrinex, that's where you will be doing the fluid mode, ops, and type for the status, as well as the status effective date and the facility. Sorry, I think that's all. Yeah, and the facility. And a little bit more of an in-depth chart here. The new processes, when they're split out, you'll see that the Commission has the eSubmission completion event creation. We will be doing some internal status management, and that is related to the observation well status and approvals, that type of thing. We'll also be looking after the abandoned zone, so downhole abandonment and surface abandonment. Petrinex, you will be managing your active well statuses for fluids, the gas, condensate, oil, and water. You will be suspending wells and anything related to operations, producing wells, and commingled wells. And then also you'll be reporting your production there. So the navigation menu for the eSubmission portal, this is the process that you will go through for creating a new completion event. I want to point out first that you must have access, or your access to eSubmission is required. You require that you have an account with the Commission first. This is something that comes up from time to time through our help desk. People can't log onto the system, and it's because we don't have an account, a registered account existing for them yet. So once you have an account with the Commission, your own company administrator will apply the appropriate security roles for each registered user. And then you'll log on to the OGC submission with the drill comp prod rep permissions. And I suspect, looking at the attendee list here, that most of you do have those permissions already or are familiar with them. So that shouldn't be too difficult to get set up. Completion events. So all of you, or most of you, should be familiar with what the eSubmission navigation menu looks like. We now have a new completion events option underneath the well menu, or in the well menu. So you'll just select completion events, or you can query a well under find well still, and bring up the well that you need to create the event for. And if there isn't a CE already existing for that drilling event, you'll get a message saying no completion events exist for any drilling events on this well. So all existing drilling events that do appear and completion events associated to your well will be displayed. So in this area here, you are going to see the drilling event, completion event, CE, etc. So you'll have the details of the well. If you would like to see more details for those events, you can just simply click in any of that area and it will provide more detail. Noting that the CEs may only be created for wells that have been rig released, and CEs may not be created for wells that have been surface abandoned. So you need to have an available drilling event to be able to create the completion event. So if you are done viewing the completion event details, you can actually just click completion events on the navigation menu to go back to the main screen. To create the new completion event, you click on the new completion event button that is highlighted in blue. This screen is going to look a little bit different when you actually go into the live environment. The UE will not be displayed when you begin the process. That will be something that is given after you have saved the information. So just so you know why that says that there. So when you go to create the new completion event, the drilling event selected will appear in the first field. The second field, the completion event field, this is auto-populated with the next available event number available in the sequence. So that is auto-populated. The completion status will always appear as completed, undefined, undefined. That is the only status available for a new completion event. And I just wanted to point out that when you transfer into the Petrinex environment, the status has a different arrangement and assignment for an undefined mode. So it will appear as NA completed, NA, NA. Just so you know that there is a difference there. And that status is something that you will be managing in the Petrinex environment. There is a cancel button down at the bottom highlighted in yellow, and that can be used at any time before saving, and it will return you to the completion event screen. So you start by entering the completion date. There's two options for that. You can enter it manually, or you can click on the little calendar icon there, and a bigger calendar screen will pop up for you to select the date. And like I said before, it must be post-rig release date and subsequent dating to all preceding CEs. So you will not be able to create a CE with an earlier date than the existing CEs in the screen. There are workarounds for that if corrections need to be made, and that's something that can be sent to our service desk, and it will be forwarded to the reservoir engineering team. Your top and base depth, the intervals must not overlap with any other existing CEs. It must be a unique interval, and you will get an error message if it does overlap with other CEs already entered under that drilling event. The area and formation are drop-down menus. You will select your area, and Once that's selected, the available formations associated to that area will what's displayed in the formation drop-down menu. So it is restricted to recognized combinations based on the area selected. Again, if you cannot see the required formation and pool combinations, you can submit to the service desk, and that's something that we can do for you in the background. This is just a screenshot of what those area and formation drop-down menus will look like. You will select your area. Once that's selected, you can go in and select the appropriate formation associated to that area. There are some fields on here that are not required. The previous fields were required. The pool, project number, and water source are optional. So these fields do not need to be filled in, and they will not prevent you from saving the other data that you have entered. The contact information at the bottom is something that is mandatory, and it can be edited. So if you see that the contact information needs to be updated or changed, you are able to do it in that screen, and it will be saved when you finish with the screen by clicking Save. Sorry, just needing some coffee. Completion event entry. So when I think progress here, I've used there well as usual, because I can remember 30,000, 30,000. So once you have gone in and you have saved your correct depths and the completion date, the UE does appear and it is assigned accordingly. You'll see that new fields of initial production period and last production period will appear. The fields are there, but there will be no data for new events. I can't answer why that is showing up there at this time, but they will be blank, so you can expect them not to be filled in. You'll see that there is a blue bar across the top of the data screen, and it'll tell you when your completion event is successfully saved. Once this is done, the data cannot be changed in eSubmission, and any requests for corrections or modifications, again, need to go through the service desk email. We are going to try and make that as speedy a process as possible, obviously, so you can complete your reporting. Completion events in eSubmission. Once you have created your new completion event, you can navigate back and look at that well again, and it will display all of the completion events associated to the drilling event that you've selected. And like I said before, all of these updates are relayed within a 10-minute window, and that CE should be available for status and production management within that 10 minutes or in about 10 minutes. So finally, for reporting and processes, once we're in the Petrinex world, as far as OGC or commission data goes, our data downloads are still going to be available, and they will reflect the new structure field that's been created for well statuses, the commingling field. BCPX environment should otherwise be fairly similar to the format that you work in for Alberta and Saskatchewan, as far as I've seen. You'll still be using the infrastructure, well infrastructure, and edit and query well functions. You'll be able to add and modify the well status. That includes the commingling. Your facility linkages will be in there, and the Petrinex reporting is available as well. I have not gone in to see all of the available reports in Petrinex, but if you had any questions, again, obviously you would go to Petrinex for that. And just to reiterate that OGC will still have the data downloads available, and they'll be updated accordingly. And last slide. Resources and contacts. BC Oil and Gas Commission, we always have information posted to our website, bcogc.ca. We have sent out an INDB information bulletin with all the Petrinex updates and changes. There is going to be a new eSubmission user guide available around go live time that will include the new completion event eSubmission process. And there's also a release guide to commission system changes, the Petrinex implementation. It's going to be, or is available now. I'd have to confirm that with Tim. And again, servicedesk@bcogc.ca if you have any technical questions or you need any modifications, changes, corrections, additions made. And we will try and make that as fast a process as possible. There are some training modules on the Petrinex website for those of you that weren't aware, and they also have an email if you have any questions for them, and the Ministry of Finance and their contact information if you had any further questions related to their end of the BC11 reporting and its retirement. So that is the presentation today. I hope it was straightforward and easy to follow. And Tim has confirmed that the release guide is available now on the website.